video game, Mario Brothers, or something like that, that we are living basically inside the matrix. That is what some people are doing. We have fields to discuss. Pressing question is more or less irrelevant, and David Chalmers, a philosopher at New York University, says signs of shortcuts and approximations may lurk in our own world, the way an image breaks up into its constituent pixels when you get close enough on a screen. And Davuti proposed a possible way to spot one of these shortcuts by studying cosmic rays, the most energetic particles scientists have ever observed. Cosmic rays would appear subtly different if space-time were formed of tiny, discrete chunks, like those computer pixels, as opposed to continuous, intact swaths, she said. For the universe to be simulated in this way, it would have to be computed, meaning it would essentially be mathematical. Tegmark's recent book, Our Mathematical Universe, My Quest for the Ultimate Nature of Reality, focuses on why the universe seems so closely tied to math. No matter what their conclusion, the fact that they're finding math in the universe, okay, now it doesn't mean that they found some numbers out there, right? But as they're looking at the way the universe behaves, they're finding that it's incredibly mathematical. To me, that sounds like, I don't know, a creator, like somebody who actually created this. Is the universe a simulation? I mean, are we living in the Matrix? Well, I don't think we're living in the Matrix like the movie The Matrix, where a bunch of machines, clocked us over the head, and now we're all stuck in some kind of a oven where they're using our body's energy. Not at all. But I would say that God created this universe, and He created it in such a way that it follows very precise mathematical equations because that's how things work. And when you start to find intelligence in the very fabric of our space, well, that should tell us that somebody intelligent actually created the universe. So I think their foolishness lies not in the fact that they're finding these amazing things, but in the fact that they would still deny that there is a creator. That is what is so unfortunate. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. And even though they're discovering these amazing things that say is the one who created the universe. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then He spoke and He said, let there be light. You see, He is intelligent, and He did it. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us all of the intricate details of, how He did it and the formulas that, He put into place. It doesn't tell us all of that stuff. It just gives us the big outline of what God did. And now it's up to us to discover, well, what does that actually look like? What are those fundamental laws that are in the universe? So he says, the more I learn about reality later on, as a physicist, the more struck I was that when you get deep down into how nature works, down into looking at all of you as a bunch of quarks and electrons, if you look at how these quarks move around, the rules are entirely mathematical, as far as we can say, Techmark said. If he were to characterize, if he were a character in a video game or simulation, he'd begin to realize that the rules were rigid and mathematical in just that way, Tegmark said. While Davuti proposed searching for concrete evidence of computation in nature, Gates, a physicist who works on superstring theory, an effort to describe all the universe's particles and forces with equations involving tiny vibrating supersymmetric strings, has found something suspiciously like computation in the theoretical equations that govern how the universe works. He discovered what look like error correcting codes, which are used to check for and correct errors that have been introduced through the physical process of computing. Finding that type of code in a universe that is not computed is extremely unlikely, Gates said. Error correcting codes are what makes browsers work. So why were they in the equations that I was studying about quarks and leptons and supersymmetry? He said, that's what brought me to this very stark realization that I could no longer say that people like Max Tegmark are crazy. Or stated another way, if you study physics long enough, you too can become crazy, he added. But Randall noted that in a universe in which errors were able to spread would quickly break down. So isn't it logical, she said, that the stable universe we find ourselves in could incorporate that type of feedback? Now, well, okay, I mean, that is amazing. But how did it get there? In the case of a computer browser, it took people at Google or Microsoft or Apple or Firefox or whoever to actually code those things in there, right? They don't just happen. See, somehow we think when we turn on our computer and the computer and the software is better than it was 20 years ago, better than it was 30 years ago, that it's just evolving by itself. No, there are real people out there that spend a lot of hours, a lot of effort, a lot of money to make all these things happen. So it's taking intelligence to make our software and hardware more advanced, more sophisticated, to work better, more error correcting. See, that's what people don't want to acknowledge, is that it was a God, some smart guy named God or Yehovah, who put all of that in there. The researchers pointed out that a similar error correcting process works during the replication of DNA. Oh, there you go again. Well, this just happens, right? No, it doesn't just happen. God created the DNA. Very intelligent processes that they want to ascribe to nature. Now, again, I'm painting kind of with a broad brush. There are many physicists who say, oh my goodness, there has to be a God. And they come to that realization and they finally admit the truth. But there are others who hold out and say, I will not believe no matter what. Even though I'm smart and I've studied all these things, I will not believe that there's a God. So sometimes the evidence is pressing us right in the face, and they choose not to see. Well, in replication of DNA, organisms whose genetic material got too mangled would not survive. Of course not. Well, kinds of simulation. The debate also probed different possible simulations and the effects they'd have on our world. For example, Tegmark discussed a famous world as simulation argument by philosopher Nick Bostrom. If it's possible to simulate a universe in our world and humanity gets around it, it's vastly more probable that we're in a simulation than in real life. There would be far more simulated people in existence than real people. But the argument strikes Tegmark odd. For one, he asked, what would prevent an infinite chain of universes, each simulating another below it? A universe, in other words, it would be like Tegmark's video game character trying to understand the operating system his game runs on. Chalmers added that if the simulation were perfect, it'd be impossible to get information about the world outside. Only if it were buggy or interactive would we be able to find out anything about it. But he'd refuse to worship the simulator's creator, regardless of its origin, Chalmers said. And see, there you go. They think it's just some kid up there hacking around, making some video game, and we're all the participants in that video game. Instead of an infinitely good, loving, wonderful creator who actually made this universe. Gates pointed out that such a simulation would mean reincarnation was possible. The simulation could always be run again, bringing everybody back to life. It starts to break down a very funny barrier between what people often think is the conflict between science and faith, he said. If you're not sure at the end of the night whether you're actually simulated or not, my advice is to go out there and really live interesting lives and do unexpected things so the simulators don't get bored and shut you down, Tegmark said. Interesting. What it would mean. When pressed, most of the researchers gave their predictions on how likely the world as simulation scenario was. Davuti wouldn't guess. Tegmark said it was 17% likely. It's the number he's pulling out of his head there. Gates said there was just a 1% chance. Randall said effectively 0, and Chalmers said 42%. These estimates reflected a slightly higher likelihood than the guesses they gave just before the debate. Tyson likened understanding the universe to trying to figure out the rules of a chess game by just watching the pieces, as originally described by famed physicist Richard Feynman. Pretty easily you can say, well, this piece moves this way, this one moves diagonal. You get that, Tyson said. But later on, that little piece that jumped 2 reaches the other end of the board and becomes a whole other piece. That's kind of freaky. It's rare, but it happens, and it's an important rule of the game that most of the time you don't see. So I'm wondering how much of a chess game without the instruction manual is the very universe in which we live. The question of the universe as a simulation might be more fundamentally about the extent humans can understand their universe from the inside out. That goal is much more essential than getting to the bottom of the simulation question, the researchers agreed. We don't know the answer, and we just keep doing science until it fails, Randall said. Thinking about the world of simulation is only useful in that it suggests interesting ways to explore the world scientifically or encourages scientists to further hone their observational skills, she said. So, interesting stuff here. Whether or not the universe is simulated, we may never know, but we do know the one who created it. Whether it's a simulation or however you want to describe it, God actually did give us the instruction manual. He gave us the big questions as to how he got this thing started, how he got the computer running, so to speak. He gives us the broad outline of what that looks like in Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, in Job chapters 37 and others. So he does give us the basics of what it looks like, what it was like when he was getting this whole thing started. So we don't need to question. We should worship the Creator because he is infinitely good. See, that's the difference. They're thinking that it's just some person who is just like us, and he's not that great, and he's just really good at hacking the universe. When in fact, the God that we know is a God